Suicides and hitchhikers. Such tidal movements of human beings produce all sorts of seldom noticed side effects. Businesses that mail direct to the customer's home spend uncounted dollars keeping their address lists up to date. The same is true of telephone companies. Of the 885,000 listings in the Washington, D.C. telephone book in 1969, over half were different from the year before. Similarly, organisations and associations have a difficult time knowing where their members are. Within a single recent year, fully 1/3 of the members of the National Society for Programmed Instruction, an organisation of educational researchers, changed their addresses. Even friends have trouble keeping up with each other's whereabouts. One can sympathise with the plaint of poor Count Lanfranco Ramponi, who laments that travel and movement have destroyed society. There is no social season anymore, he says, because nobody is anywhere at the same time, except, of course, nobodies. The good Count has been quoted as saying, "Before this, if you wanted 20 for dinner, you'd have to ask 40, but now you'd first ask 200. Despite such inconveniences, the overthrow of the tyranny of geography opens a form of freedom that proves exhilarating to millions. Speed, movement, and even relocation carry positive connotations for many. This accounts for the psychological attachment that Americans and Europeans display towards automobiles, the technological incarnation of spatial freedom. Motivational researcher Ernest Dichter has unburdened himself of abundant Freudian nonsense in his time, but he is shrewdly insightful when he suggests that the auto is the most powerful tool for mastery available in the ordinary Western man. The automobile has become the modern symbol of initiation. The licence of the 16 or 17-year-old is a valid admission to adult society. In the affluent nations, he writes, most people have enough to eat and are reasonably well housed. Having achieved this 1,000-year-old dream of humanity, they now reach out for further satisfactions. They want to travel, discover, be at least physically independent. The automobile is the mobile symbol of mobility. In fact, the last thing that any family wishes to surrender when hard pressed by financial hardship is the automobile. And the worst punishment an American parent can mete out to a teenager is to ground them, i.e. deprive them of the use of their automobile. Young girls in the United States, when asked what they regard as important about a boy, immediately list a car. 67% of those interviewed in a recent survey said a car is essential, and a 19-year-old boy, Alfred Aranga of Albuquerque, New Mexico, confirmed gloomily that if a guy doesn't have a car, he doesn't have a girl. Just how deep this passion for automobility runs among the youth is tragically illustrated by the suicide of a 17-year-old Wisconsin boy, William Nebel, who was grounded by his father after his driver's license was suspended for speeding. Before putting a .22 caliber rifle bullet in his brain, the boy penned a note that ended, "Without a license, I don't have my car, job, or social life, so I think that it is better to end it all right now." It is clear that millions of young people all over the technological world agree with the poet Marinetti, who, more than half a century ago, shouted, "A roaring racing car is more beautiful than the winged victory." Freedom from fixed social position is linked so closely with freedom from fixed geographical position that when super-industrial man feels socially constricted, his first impulse is to relocate. This idea seldom occurs to the peasant raised in his village or the coal miner toiling away in the black deeps. A lot of problems are solved by migration. Go, travel, said a student of mine before rushing off to join the Peace Corps. But movement becomes a positive value in its own right. an assertion of freedom, not merely a response to or escape from outside pressures. A survey of 539 subscribers to Red Book magazine sought to determine why their addresses had changed in the previous year. Along with such reasons as family grew too big for old home or pleasanter surroundings, fully 10% checked off just wanted to change. An extreme manifestation of this urge to move is found among the female hitchhikers who are beginning to form a recognisable sociological category of their own. Thus, a young Catholic girl in England gives up her job in selling advertising space for a magazine and goes off with a friend intending to hitchhike to Turkey. In Hamburg, the girls split up. The first girl, Jackie, cruises the Greek islands, reaches Istanbul, and at length returns to England, where she takes a job with another magazine. She stays only long enough to finance another trip. After that, she comes back and works as a waitress, rejecting promotion to hostess on the grounds that I don't expect to be in England very long. At 23, Jackie is a confirmed hitchhiker, thumbing her way indefatigably all over Europe with a gas pistol in her rucksack, returning to England for 6 or 8 months, then starting out again. Ruth, 28, has been living this way for years, her longest stay in any one place having been 3 years. Hitchhiking as a way of life, she says, is fine, because while it is possible to meet people, you don't get too involved. Teenage girls in particular, perhaps eager to escape restrictive home environments, are passionately keen travellers. A survey of girls who read 17 magazine, for example, showed that 40.2% took one or more major trips during the summer before the survey. 69% of these trips carried the girl outside her home state and 9% took her abroad. But the itch to travel begins long before the teen years. Thus, when Beth, the daughter of a New York psychiatrist, learned that a friend of hers had visited Europe, her tearful response was, "I'm 9 years old already and I've never been to Europe." This positive attitude towards movement is reflected in survey findings that Americans tend to admire travellers. Thus, researchers at the University of Michigan have found that respondents frequently term travellers lucky or happy. To travel is to gain status, which explains why so many American travellers keep ragged airline tags on their luggage or attaché cases long after their return from a trip. One wag has suggested that someone set up a business washing and ironing old airline tags for status-conscious travellers. Moving one's household, on the other hand, is a cause for commiseration rather than congratulations. Everyone makes ritual comments about the hardships of moving, yet the fact is that those who have moved once are more likely to move again than those who have never moved. The French sociologist Alain Touraine explains that having already made one change and being less attached to the community, they are readier to move again. And a British trade union official, R. Clark, not long ago told an international manpower conference that mobility might well be a habit formed in student days. He pointed out that those who spent their college years away from home move in less restricted circles than uneducated and more homebound manual workers. Not only do the college people move more in later life, but, he suggested, they pass on to their children attitudes that facilitate mobility. While for many worker families relocation is a dreaded necessity, a consequence of unemployment or other hardships, for the middle and upper classes moving is most often associated with the extension of the good life. For them, travelling is a joy, and moving out usually means moving up. In short, throughout the nation, in transition to super-industrialism among the people of the future, movement is a way of life. A liberation from the constrictions of the past, a step into the still more affluent future. The Mournful Movers. Dramatically different attitudes, however, are evinced by the immobiles. It is not only the agricultural villager in India or Iran who remains fixed in one place for most or all of their life. The same is true of millions of blue-collar workers, particularly those in backward industries. As technological change roars through the advanced economies, outmoding whole industries and creating new ones almost overnight, millions of unskilled and semi-skilled workers find themselves compelled to relocate. The economy demands mobility, and most Western governments, notably Sweden, Norway, Denmark and the United States, spend large sums to encourage workers to retrain for new jobs and leave their homes in pursuit of them. For coal miners in Appalachia or textile workers in the French provinces, however, this proves to be excruciatingly painful. Even for big city workers uprooted by urban renewal and relocated quite near to their former homes, the disruption is often agonising. It is quite precise to speak of their reactions, says Dr. Mark Freed of the Centre for Community Studies, Massachusetts General Hospital, as expressions of grief. These are manifest in the feelings of painful loss, the continued longing, the general depressive tone, frequent symptoms of psychological or social or somatic distress, the sense of helplessness, the occasional expressions of both direct and displaced anger, and tendencies to idealise the lost place. The responses, he declares, are strikingly similar to mourning for a lost person. Sociologist Monique Viau of the French Ministry of Social Affairs says, "The French are very attached to their geographical backgrounds. For jobs even 30 or 40 kilometres away, they are reluctant, extremely reluctant, to move. The unions call such moves deportations." Even some educated and affluent movers show signs of distress when they are called upon to relocate. The author, Clifton Fadiman, telling of his move from a restful Connecticut town to Los Angeles, reports that he was shortly felled by a shotgun burst of odd physical and mental ailments. "In the course of 6 months, my illness got straightened out. The neurologist diagnosed my trouble as culture shock." For relocation of one's home, even under the most favourable circumstances, entails a series of difficult psychological readjustments. In a famous study of a Canadian suburb they call Crestwood Heights, sociologists J.R. Seeley, R.A. Sim and E.W. Loosely state, "The rapidity with which the transition has to be accomplished and the depth to which change must penetrate the personality are such as to call for the greater flexibility of behaviour and stability of personality. Ideology, speech sometimes, food habits, and preferences in decor must be made over with relative suddenness and in the absence of unmistakable clues as to the behaviour to be adopted. The steps by which people make such adjustments have been mapped out by psychiatrist James S. Tyhurst of the University of British Columbia. In field studies of individuals following immigration, he says, a fairly consistent pattern can be defined. Initially, the person is concerned with the immediate present, with an attempt to find work, make money, and find shelter. These features are often accompanied by restlessness and increased psychomotor activity. As the person's sense of strangeness or incongruity in the new surroundings grows, a second phase, psychological arrival, takes place. Characteristic of this are increasing anxiety and depression, increasing self-preoccupation, often with somatic preoccupations and somatic symptoms, general withdrawal from the society in contrast to previous activity, and some degree of hostility and suspicion. The sense of difference and helplessness becomes increasingly intense, and the period is characterised by marked discomfort and turmoil. This period of more or less disturbance may last for 1 or several months. Only then does this third phase begin. This takes the form of relative adjustment to the new surroundings, a settling in, or else, in extreme cases, the development of more severe disturbances manifested by more intense disorders of mood, the development of abnormal mental content, and breaks with reality. Some people, in short, never do adjust adequately.